Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book. Today we're talking about Molloy by Samuel Beckett, the first in his trilogy of sorts. Like many authors on this channel, Beckett has been one that I have been meaning to get around to for years and years and years. Of course, my first time hearing about him really was Waiting for Godot. But then it wasn't until a long time after that that I learned of the close connection that Beckett has with James Joyce in not only in a sense of influence and inspiration, but in a personal connection as well. And he kind of came out of that absurdist, existentialist wave of sorts that became, that kind of in the wake of the modernism of the 20s and 30s really started to resonate. You had figures like Sartre, but then in the English-speaking world, perhaps none so as clear, kind of post Faulkner, Woolf, and Joyce than Samuel Beckett. Even though he was kind of their same generation, he still, I think because when he started publishing a lot of his fiction in the 40s and 50s, he was an antecedent to them. Now, at first I remember thinking that he was a French author because a lot of his works, dramatic and prose, were originally written in French and then translated often by Beckett himself into English. And I've heard that the uniqueness of these translations they are not a one-for-one translation. Oftentimes when it came to his prose works, or so I've read, Beckett wrote in French because he wasn't as proficient in French as he was fluent in his native English. So he could do more experimental things. He could play around and mess with the conventions and the rules because he wasn't as fluent in French. So it was perhaps dirtier grammatically, perhaps more vulgar. And he knew that, and he could use that to his advantage in creating these just muddy works. I think no pun intended, I guess, when it comes to his novel How It Is, when you get a protagonist that is literally trudging through mud. But that, I think, in prose form is really what Beckett is going for with his works. Of course, Molloy, this first part of this collected trilogy, mini omnibus here, Molloy is, by most accounts, or by most people's standards, a 170-page novel is not a long one by any means. But it feels like it could have been 1,000 pages of a stream of consciousness of just detestable, characters that do not seek to get to some sort of transcendence. That's, I think, is one of the big differences, especially with the more stream of consciousness works of an author like Faulkner. When you get to things like The Sound and the Fury, when it comes to a character like Molloy, you contrast Benji in Sound and the Fury with Molloy and Molloy, and also Jacques Moran, because this is a novel of two characters, and it is a stark difference. There is a kind of an intellectual transcendence, I think, within Benji, Quentin, all the characters within The Sound and the Fury. You could throw in Absalom as well for kind of that high stream of consciousness mark, As I Lay Dying even. But within Molloy, it is a story of mud. It is a story of vulgarity and dirtiness. A novel which point I didn't fully come to, I think, really start to understand. I still don't fully understand, but I came to understand getting towards the end of the second half, the second part. of this book. So, what is Molloy about? Well, that is very difficult even to say, even having read it. But this is split into two sections. The first, at least in this version, the first is about 85 pages. It is from the perspective of the character of Molloy, this kind of vagrant, destitute, injured, almost disgusting sort of man who seems to lack intelligence, lack intellect, who is fixated on things such as his bicycle. He has crutches. He wonders often about his mother. He is constantly fascinated in an almost infantile way, just in terms of his grasp of understanding. He does not have a grasp of reality, of human functions. It's almost like he has regressed to the state of mind of an infant, but of a Freudian infant of sorts. And he's kind of wandering along in this countryside and into these towns. And it appears as if he's writing this novel from a place where he is kind of bedridden, or he's in this room and he's kind of remembering these places of freedom, but they're not really instances of freedom. He is constantly trapped. There are great scenes where he's going through a town or going through a forest, and then Beckett, through the prose, kind of embarks on a descent of the self, a descent of the character, into this sort of, I would say it's depravity and violence, but it seems like Molloy is not even capable of understanding what violence is, or what depravity is, even though it seems that the characters can observe that within him when they interact with Molloy. He's not even sure really if Molloy is his name. And the part kind of goes on and on and on until it just stops. And then we get on to Jacques Morin, the second part of this book, roughly the last, it is pretty much split 85-85. Like directly, it's like a 50% for both of these characters. Jacques Morin is a man, and it's very interesting tracking the progression of his side of the narrative. It is stream of consciousness, but it starts more, I don't want to say staccato in a way, but more clear and yet more splintered than Molloy. Molloy, it's just, one kind of continuous paragraph for 85 pages. And we get a little more of an established and clearer narrative rhythm when it comes to Jacques Morin. Now, Morin, it seems like he's an investigator of sorts. He is told to investigate Molloy and to kind of go off into the countryside to then find Molloy. And he is kind of racked with this great and kind of sadly humorous and I guess relatable Catholic guilt. He worries about missing Mass on a Sunday, and then kind of there are a lot of religious musings within the character of Morin, and just the terrible relationships that he has with his son, also named Jacques, and his wife, if I remember correctly, her name is Martha. And he is a man of immense appetite, constantly fearing that he has drunk a beer before he is to receive the Eucharist, and then absolutely pigging out when he realizes he missed Mass. But then he sets out on this journey to find Molloy, and not in a he is not think he has his own descent. Molloy kind of has he is in the midst of a descent. Morin, it almost begins when he jettisons any religious ties that he has, that he starts to kind of fall over himself, and he drags his son into it. He has these kind of high mind ambitions for his son, but it almost would do him a service to jettison his son as he goes on this journey. They go on this on foot journey that just it extends in its disgustingness, its longing, and it becomes clear. And this isn't even really a spoil. I mean, I could describe the whole plot of this book, and it wouldn't be a spoiler because a lot of it is just what we take away from it. But if you're averse to kind of even having an inkling of like where the story goes, I'll just kind of say a spoiler warning then. But when Moran intuits a Molloy within himself, a Molloy that these other characters have, I almost started to wonder at first, is Moran Molloy? And is that what kind of the whole purpose of this work is? We see the descent of the interior in the first half of the book, but then we go kind of back to when he is a man with a family, with a somewhat of a respectable position, but who is constantly on the edge and then just plunges. There is a descent into violence for Moran as it goes along. He even kills a man. And there's this weird scene between him and his son where he's trying to get him to go off to buy this bicycle. He's just obsessed, so much so with money, and he is so much so obsessed with the caring for his hens and his bees. And he, of course, goes off. He doesn't find Molloy, and then he returns, but he seems to as the narrative becomes more jumbled, and then it just kind of opens up into the sort of unbroken paragraph that we came to expect with Molloy. He inhabits the characteristics of Molloy. He returns home to a home that has abandoned him, that he has abandoned, and a home that has abandoned him. And he sets down to write his report, and his report begins the way that the second section begins. It is, and then I think Beckett's intent then becomes clear to me at the end, with being just a clear, almost pointed look into the inner depravity and condition and deterioration of the self that is perhaps constantly at work. Maybe that there is a fine line there, but that maybe characters like Moran and Molloy are more in touch. Just when they like writhe around in the forest, and I know with the little that I know about Beckett's other prose work that is almost a preoccupation of his. And it is interesting to see that. It is, you feel like you need to take a shower after finishing this book. And it is both overwhelming and exhausting ironically, in its brevity, which adds to this. But it is very good. But I don't know if I would, I'm not clamoring necessarily to kind of jump into another one of his books. I'm able to kind of really respect where he was going with Molloy, and I'm excited to read other things by Beckett. But it is a lot, and as we see the descent of Moran in part two, as you kind of grasp, okay, as the lines between who Moran is and who Molloy is start to blur and merge, and as it seems that they might be one and the same, or perhaps that is Beckett kind of conflating that to humanity in general, it becomes clear what Beckett is trying to wrestle with, the preoccupations of status, of religion, of concern, of grief, of money, and of identity as well. And that those constructs, those lines, it is when you pare away to the individual matter, which he does with Molloy, of stripping away even all intellect, all understanding of the world, you kind of get this chaotic goo of a man. And the same goes for Moran, again, with that descent. So, I mean, I don't know how much more I can say. You'd probably have to read this novel 50 times And I'm sure that when I eventually get around to the other two novels in this, Malone Dies and The Unnameable, that sort of sentiment will be kind of further. That it's just it. I wouldn't be surprised if that deterioration of man is at the center of all of his works, and we shall see where Beckett will go. But for now, I kind of put him on the back burner. You know, get some palate cleansers in there, and perhaps return sometime soon to Malone Dies. So, Molloy by Samuel Beckett. If you have read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.